once heard a chef from New Orleans say, "The thing about New Orleans food, despite how good the restaurants are, is the best meals are in people's homes, and you need to be invited in." Do you know that the same thing could be said about the church? On any Sunday morning, you can drive past dozens of churches. Most of them are as faithful as they know how to be. They gather on a Sunday morning, they sit in rows, they listen to a great sermon, singing along to a band or a choir. But we are under the deep conviction that no matter how good these churches may be, the best version of the church is found in people's homes. In Acts chapter 2, we're given just in a couple sentences a sketch of what the early church looked like. In verses 46 and 47, it says, "And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts." The church gathered in two places. One in the temple on Sundays, that would have been a gathering of thousands, and day by day in each other's homes. That would have been a gathering of dozens. And from there, as the New Testament unfolds, you see that a house church was where the focal point of ministry was. It's impossible to read the scriptures and not see the presence and purpose of house churches, to provide people with a loving family of faith where they would be personally known and pastored. And at Rubber City Church, we are in pursuit to conform ourselves to what we believe Jesus originally designed the church to be. We gather as one big family on Sundays, as they did in the temple, and throughout the week in house churches, led by qualified and appointed pastors. Another helpful scripture to look at is Titus chapter 1, and Paul's writing to Titus and directing him on how to pastor this new church on the island of Crete. And in verse 5 he says, "This is why I left you in Crete, that you might put what remained into order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you." Paul's essentially saying, Titus, don't you dare attempt to pastor all these people in Crete. If you do, it'll get too big and you won't be accessible to people, and people won't be cared for and led the way Jesus wants them to be cared for and led. So instead, appoint elders and pastors in every town so that way everyone has access to a pastor. The principle is clear in Scripture. Jesus wants everyone in His church to have access to a pastor. Jesus wants everyone to be personally known and pastored. Jesus does not desire for His church to be distinguished by a charismatic preacher or a group of people who sit in rows on a Sunday that have a beautiful building architecture or an amazing worship band. Jesus tells us in John 13, "A new commandment I give you, that you would love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Jesus says, by this one thing, by the level and degree of your love for one another, by your ability to love as Jesus loved you by sacrificing His own life upon a cross for you and for me. And that's the type of love we're talking about. That's the type of love for one another that we should have in Jesus' church. Jesus wants His church to be distinguished by a sacrificial devotion to one another, where we would love one another so radically like they did in the early church, to the point where we would sell our belongings to generously meet each other's needs. And the best ecosystem for that kind of church, that kind of community, that kind of family is within a home. And you need to be invited in. So join us. And through it, we believe Jesus will change you, He'll change us, and He'll change our world.